Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Rasulillah. I want to talk about views of Muslim scholars on logic. Some of them, not all of them, and this is not going to be exhaustive. So basically, as mentioned by al-Akhdari, you have three opinions. He doesn't get into the specific sciences, but here we want to look at their views through the lens of their science, because their science tells us a lot about their frames and how they see things. Like you wouldn't take, for example, the scholar of hadith and apply it to seerah. You wouldn't take the scholar of seerah and apply it to hadith. You wouldn't take someone who's a scholar of nahu and have them look at, say, fiqh of jihad. Each one of them has their own sort of specific talent. In regards to logic, you have the fuqaha who largely opposed it. Number one, because Aristotelian logic changes Islamic natural disposition with complicated industrial laws in defining and inferring. So their argument was that it actually limits and restricts Islam. Islam's orientation toward fulfilling and changing human needs, while logic considers its laws as universal and constant. I find this argument very interesting, right? Like their argument is that logic is restricting the potential of Islam and creating unnecessary, if you will, rules that are going to, restraints that are going to limit the efficacy and achievements of Islam to find for human beings and reveal to them what's best for them and prevent harm from them. The third argument, the companions and the imams did not engage with this logic despite their mastery of all branches of knowledge. Number two are the mutakallimun. Here we're talking about the theologians. The reason for their rejection of Aristotelian logic lies in the rejection of it being rooted in Aristotle's metaphysics. Because, of course, it's going to contradict Islamic theology, since many foundations of this logic are connected to that understanding of metaphysics. In its pure form, in its Aristotelian form, those scholars reject it. In its sanitized form, it's much more complicated. Many of them allowed it. Third are Islamic philosophers, and we're aware that Islamic philosophers obviously accepted the Greek academic heritage, including logic, considering it a complete intellectual unit and regarding it as the unshakable law of reason. But that's not necessarily true. Not all of the philosophers agreed with this. Most of the great Sunni imams didn't see it as unshakable law of reason. They saw it as a tool to be used, just like grammar is to use to help speak. From this, it becomes apparent that Muslim jurists who aimed to learn logic did so secretly for fear of being accused of corrupting their faith. That's in the early time. But after sanitation, it becomes adopted by most of the classical madaris till now. In Azhar, you learn logic in high school. Al-Ghazali himself did not present his logical research under the name logic, but he used the word ma'yar or mizan. Some theorize that he did that to avoid angering the jurists, but honestly, the ingredients would still have been there. So I believe that he named them those things, unless somewhere he explicitly mentioned that, because he felt that name better represented the science as a balance, as a scale, as a measuring block. So the real reason for Muslims' criticism of logic is that this logic is based on the deductive method, which is the spirit of Greek civilization based on philosophical thought. That's the key issue. The Greek civilization did not leave a place for experimentation in this method, which is one of the major pillars of Islam, ijtihad. So it's interesting, we tend to think of someone that would be opposed to logic would be because they felt that logic was untethered from any type of rules that would restrict it. Here we see Muslim scholars are like, no, you're imposing something which is restricting, limited and limiting the dynamics of Islam. However, these criticisms did not prevent the existence of support for logic even amongst the opponents of philosophy, such as al-Ghazali, who claimed that whoever does not know logic has no confidence in his knowledge, and he approved of engaging with logic. Similarly, this is the opinion of Tajuddin al-Suqi and the majority of Sunnis. Perhaps none of the sciences of the ancients found as much acceptance amongst Muslims as logic did, honestly. And so here's a chart of some of the scholars. You see some comparative kind of positions as well as their key arguments summarized in a very, very simple way. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, strong rejection. He felt that it contradicted revelation and that logic contradicted sound reasoning. So therefore it changes the Islamic natural disposition. Ibn Salah, also as a scholar of hadith, complete rejection. He felt that it was a gateway to philosophy and evil, not practiced by righteous predecessors. He felt that people who taught it should be punished. The Mutakallimun, but this needs, as I said earlier, needs a little bit of a breakdown. Not all of them rejected it. Connected to the metaphysical components found in Aristotelian theory and logic. So they opposed that. But those that didn't have an issue with it. Al-Ghazali qualified acceptance useful tool for knowledge, but presented under different names to avoid controversy. Al-Ghazali clearly says that studying logic is fault. I don't agree with this. Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, full acceptance, essential foundations for all sciences, universal laws of thought. Then you can put the majority of the Sunnis who say that logic is important. It should be studied by people who have knowledge of the book and Sunnah, and not by those who don't. Next time, insha'Allah ta'ala, we're going to begin the actual class study. Up until this point, it's been sort of an introduction and start to talk about thought and language, signification, and the different types of signification and how this works in laying out our theories for the Islamic rational sciences and the applications. Barakallahu feekum wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.